Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So first things first, I apologize if you hear any noise. They're outside doing work. We have like 3 people across the street from us moving, and they're getting work done on their homes so they can sell them. So it sucks to suck, right? But it's cool. We're gonna get through this video anyway. So I want to come on and talk about hygral fatigue because I feel like everybody comes on YouTube to discuss hygral fatigue, but I'd say most people don't really have an understanding of hygral fatigue. And I think the more people do videos on it, the more confused we get. I was the same way. The only video that I've seen that I felt like was even remotely helpful was from A Love for Me. I will link her channel either like in the cards if I can or in the description box. I love her videos because she's really informative. She does her research. I don't always agree with everything that she says, but she actually does put in the time to do her research. So, y'all know me. I don't talk about nothing without actually learning about it first. So, I took a couple of days to sit down and find everything that I could on hygral fatigue so that I can make this video for you guys. So, if you are just as confused about hygral fatigue as I have been, then just keep watching. I got my notes. I got my computer in front of me. Let's talk hygral fatigue. So, first things first, what the hell is hygral fatigue? A lot of people call hygral fatigue moisture overload. A lot of people call hygral fatigue over conditioning. And I think a big problem with discussing hygral fatigue is that people call hygral fatigue a lot of things that it's not. And truthfully, there is no scientific research that has been done on human hair. These concepts are pulled from other scientific research that has been done on wool and other fabrics. So, I went on to Naturally Curly because I feel like Naturally Curly is kind of the source that everybody uses when it comes to understanding hair care and different hair terminology. So according to Naturally Curly, hygral fatigue is what results from the constant swelling and contracting of the cuticle. So when does your cuticle swell? Your cuticle swells when you introduce water to it, when you are drenching your hair in water, and even more so when you are using warm water or applying heat to that wet hair. When your hair dries, that is when your cuticle contracts. This can result in changes in porosity and, for most people, issues with elasticity and eventually breakage. So I think that it's important to understand this because a lot of people think that hygral fatigue is just over conditioning or over moisturizing your hair, and it's not that simple. Now, if you have hygral fatigue, there's a high chance that because of the practices that we use, you have over-conditioned hair. But a lot of people refer to their over-conditioned hair as being hair that has suffered from hygral fatigue. And that is not the case. So I did a little research, and I also want to stress, guys, that I think a lot of the issue is that anybody can write a blog, okay? And a lot of us tend to do our research on blogs. And I will just put it straight up with you guys. There weren't really any blogs except for one that I am looking at right now that actually cited any sources. If you cannot cite a source in your blog when you're trying to talk about something that is scientific, then I'm not listening to you, and that's why I just pulled the definition off of naturallycurly.com and left it at that. So I am actually looking at, this is from a little over a year ago. It's called The Nerdy Curly Girl. I'm going to cite this post in there, and I'm also going to cite the sources that she used. And I'm using this blog because she cited the sources that I found. So it's a pretty consistent thing here. So to understand hygral fatigue and understanding where hygral fatigue comes from, hygral fatigue is not a scientifically coined word. Or term. The term that was scientifically coined comes from hygral expansion. So this was research that was done some time ago. This was published in 1991. And this is, the title of it is Measuring Hygral Expansion in Woven Wool Fabrics. So, obviously, when we're talking about wool and we're talking about fabric, wool it does come from an animal, so it's probably going to be one of the closest things that we'll find to our hair, that will mimic what happens when it is wet, when it is dry, etc. I think the biggest point that was made in here, and I will just go ahead and read this off for you guys. So, hygral expansion measurements of woven wool fabrics are influenced by the way in which wet fabric, after relaxation in water, is dried. If the wet fabric is dried directly in an oven, the hygral expansion values are relatively low. But if the fabric is allowed to dry under ambient conditions before oven drying, the values are relatively high. The fabric drying conditions have an important bearing on the magnitude of the dry dimension, and this in turn influences the hygral expansion value obtained. So the breakdown is, basically, they took their samples and they used different methods of drying. So they allowed those samples to sit in solution for a certain period of time. Some were continuously wet and never allowed to dry. Others were dried in an oven. Others were dried for a certain period of time just in normal conditions and then put into an oven. So those were the testing mechanisms that they used. Obviously, I just read off a lot of scientific jargon to you guys. And so the breakdown of it is, so if you were to take a piece of wool, a piece of yarn, etc., and you put it in water and you took it out, and you put it in water and you took it out, and you put it in water again and you took it out, and you continue to do that, eventually those fibers, the keratin, the protein bonds, are going to break that down. That is essentially what hygral fatigue is. I think a lot of misunderstandings in terms of hygral fatigue come into play because of the practices that we have utilized over time, specifically being the curly girl method. And this is why I don't use the curly girl method, because when I tried to use the curly girl method, I experienced hygral fatigue. Now, in me not doing my research, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, it's just too much conditioner. But really, it was the reality of dunking my head into water every day. And so when it comes to starting the curly girl method, I feel like people have gotten so far away from the curly girl method that nobody really knows how to actually do the curly girl method anymore. And so I feel like most people shouldn't even be saying that they use the curly girl method because nobody really sticks to it. But the one person that I watched back in the day that actually did the curly girl method to a T was Ty Crable. I don't know if any of you guys remember Ty Crable. She was an awesome YouTuber. She actually started her own brand, but she is like living her best life right now. And she stopped posting on YouTube. But she started her curly girl method challenge, and the first thing you do is clarify. But in the curly girl method, you are expected to co-wash pretty much every day. Obviously, you can modify that, and many people do modify that. I think it's important to understand here, I know a lot of people like to talk about hygral fatigue as if it's a myth, but I think the important thing to understand here is that everybody's hair is different. Everyone has different densities. Everyone's hair strands are thicker or thinner, etc., and we have different porosities. So who is hygral fatigue going to affect the most? Hygral fatigue is going to affect people who have fine strands and either medium to high porosity hair the most. I'd be willing to bet if someone actually took the time to do a study on this, that you would see less occasions of hygral fatigue in people that have low porosity hair. Now, I think the issue that comes in with a lot of low porosity people saying they have hygral fatigue is that a lot of low porosity individuals have been tricked into thinking that they do not have to use protein. I think another issue comes in is that a lot of the natural products that we're using are not pH balanced. A lot of people don't understand the importance of pH balance. And the entire point of having pH balanced products is that when you shampoo your hair, you're raising that cuticle. You're lifting the dirt, you're raising the cuticle. That allows moisture to get into your strands. If you're not using pH balanced products, then your cuticle is not going to lay back the way that it should. That is also important to note as well. So if you are over conditioning your hair, there is a high chance that you are more than likely putting yourself in a position where you can experience hygral fatigue. A lot of people have a debate on overnight conditioning. I don't think that overnight conditioning is the devil. I think that excessively conditioning overnight is problematic. Why? Because you're leaving your cuticle raised for hours and hours and hours at a time. Now, obviously, whether your hair is completely wet before you put that conditioner on and whether it is completely dry before you put that conditioner on is going to play a role in how your cuticle is raised. And 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to get that much absorption of water into your cuticle if you are overnight deep conditioning on dry hair. I think that's why we're seeing an influx of overnight conditioners that instruct you to apply them onto dry hair. So I do want to address underneath a lot of people's videos, those who have spoken on hygral fatigue. I see a lot that people assume that hygral fatigue is a myth, that it is just a scare tactic for naturals, and that it's impossible for hygral fatigue to exist in Black people because we have the driest hair. And I'm just here to tell you that's bullshit. And that's honestly kind of idiotic. So I just want to take y'all all the way back to biology, middle school and high school. When you start biology, you talk about the cell. And what do cells need? They need water. They need liquid. It is important. Water is what keeps life going. It is the majority of what covers this earth, and it is the majority of what makes up our bodies. But too much water is always a possibility. And you learn in biology, a balanced cell has a balance of water. So it will look like this. If you have too little water, it shrivels up. And it looks like that. If you have too much water, it lyses and it bursts. Hydrolysis. So lyses and it bursts. That really isn't much different from what we're talking about with hygral fatigue. When your hair is balanced, your hair is intact. It's strong. It is healthy. If you have too little water, bonds break. If you have too much water, bonds also break. And that is what's happening in our hair. I believe African Hair God talked about this. He was saying how he got way too happy with his steamer, and y'all know what steam does. Makes that cuticle lift, forces that water in. It is amazing for people that are extremely low porosity, that really struggle with getting sufficient hydration into the hair. And so he found that his hair became damaged. It looked like he had heat damage, and he was like, but I'm not using heat. But he was overusing his steamer. And that can be just as damaging as overusing heat. But it's not something that we want to accept because it goes against all the laws that we have been taught in our minds. And I think a lot of people struggle with certain things, but they don't understand it because, truthfully, guys, we can train our minds to think anything looks good. I'm just being real with you. Like, we can train our minds to think anything looks good. There's a reason why we have naturals in the community that are walking around with heat damage, and they swear up and down that their curls pop just as much as anybody else's that doesn't use heat. You know, we can train ourselves to think anything looks good if we really want to. We can train ourselves to think that something is okay when we want it to be okay. I think that a good portion of the natural hair community is low porosity. And the likelihood that the majority of naturals are going to experience hygral fatigue is relatively slim, even if you are making bad hair care choices. And this isn't me saying that you sleeping in your deep conditioner is a horrible choice and you have to stop doing it. I uploaded a video last week where I said I used a deep conditioner overnight. I felt lazy, but is that something that I do all the time? Absolutely not. And this goes back to knowing your hair. I know that I have fine strands. I know that my strands break easily. Another thing that I also bring up to you guys a lot when it comes to my hair is the simple fact that when we roll into summertime, I have way more issues retaining moisture and keeping my hair strong because I have a normal porosity. My hair takes in moisture easily and it loses moisture at the same rate. And so because of that, I take in all that moisture from the environment. And oftentimes, just standing outside, if I'm not using the right product, my hair will feel wet, it will feel mushy, and my elasticity is gone. It's non-existent. If I had my stylist on here, she'd tell you, if I walk outside in humidity with my natural hair, my natural curl pattern, I can stand there and you can literally watch my strands change curl pattern. They loosen up, they hang, it looks disgusting. That's purely because of my porosity. It's purely because I have fine strands, but I know this, and so I act accordingly. So are there times when I overnight deep condition? Absolutely. Look, I got a chronic illness. Sometimes I fall asleep in my deep conditioner. It just is what it is. Does it destroy my hair? No. But the times where I was doing it excessively, did it mess up my hair? Absolutely. Absolutely. And there was no hiding from that. I knew that it was messing up my hair. And when I realized that that was messing up my hair, I stopped. After doing my research, after really looking into things and understanding what hygral fatigue is and where it comes from, do I believe that hygral fatigue is a myth? Absolutely not. And I say that because based on the things that I have experienced, the mistakes that I have made in my natural hair journey, and what I watch on a daily basis just going outside, absolutely, I know I have experienced hygral fatigue, not over conditioning, but hygral fatigue. I know that I have experienced it. I know that I have done this to myself. I know that my hair has gone through this. The last thing that I wanted to address was a lot of people do say that they feel like this is a myth because there are other people of other races that may wash their hair every single day and they don't experience hygral fatigue. They don't experience hygral fatigue because their hair dries. And that is the biggest issue. That is the issue for a lot of us, is that we can't get our hair to dry. And that is why a lot of stylists keep trying to get us to understand that we need to stop being so afraid of heat. And I don't mean direct heat. I mean blow dryers and hooded dryers. I know a lot of people feel like, okay, other races can wash every day. One, that's not necessarily true. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And those people have experienced damage, breakage, dryness the same way that we have. And I mean, if we really want to argue about it, I heard white people talking about this whole co-washing thing before I heard us talking about it. I mean, when was a thing, you know, like I'm just going to be real. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so just because there may be white people that are shampooing every single day doesn't necessarily mean that they should. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not experiencing damage. But their damaged hair is going to look way different than our damaged hair does. If you don't have curls, you can't clock curl damage, which is what it is. And so for most of my Caucasian friends, their damage looks very different from mine. Usually straw-like hair. The hair is very brittle to the touch. It breaks a lot. It's extremely dry, etc. And if you really think about it, it's the same thing that we experience with hygral fatigue. It just looks different because it's straight. And so that's not an excuse to not consider these things. If you don't think that you've ever experienced hygral fatigue, then that's great. you probably don't need to worry about anything that anybody says about hygral fatigue. And there's probably quite a lot of people that have never experienced it and never will experience it in their lifetimes. But there's still a lot of people who do, and it helps those of us who are prone to things like this to have accurate information and to have information that's going to help us understand our experience better, as opposed to simply throwing terminology on top of throwing on terminology. You have to be willing to take the steps to not only learn your hair, but if you know that something's wrong, do proper research. Don't just read a blog that just spouts off a bunch of stuff. And when it comes down to it, if you can get in touch with a stylist that can probably help you with what's going on with your hair, it's always beneficial to have a professional opinion, because we didn't go to school for this. They did. And as much as we like to look down on stylists sometimes, a lot of times stylists can be really helpful when it comes to understanding these things, and they have professional strength products that can help us if we have extreme damage. Sometimes we can't fix it ourselves. Sometimes we need to see a professional. I like that in this blog, she does refer to hygral fatigue. Instead of calling it hygral fatigue, she refers to it as excessive water hydration syndrome. And I think that is the best thing to call it, because it's really what it is: excessively wetting your hair, allowing your hair to be wet for prolonged periods of time. That really is what hygral fatigue is excessive water. And I know that we don't like to really think about the fact that we can excessively be wetting our hair, but it's true. It's honestly, like, it really is basic biology. Like, I hate to put it that way. Like, I don't want to sound like a snarky, condescending bitch, but it really is basic biology. Anything can be water damaged. Anything can have excessive water. That is possible. And so there is absolutely no reason why that can't happen to your hair. Too much of anything is a problem, and water is the same way. And so when thinking about hygral fatigue, don't think about it as, oh, I used the most moisturizing deep conditioner on the planet overnight and now I have hygral fatigue. That's not what hygral fatigue is. It's not the conditioner that is causing your breakage. It's the water. It's just like overwatering a plant, guys. I wanted to make this video just because I know that a lot of the stuff I've seen on hygral fatigue has had me mad confused. And I was like, but that doesn't make sense. Like, are you saying you're excessively putting conditioner or moisturizers on your hair? Or are you saying you're excessively washing your hair? And that's what it comes down to, is the excessive use of water. Oftentimes, like I said, conditioner plays into that, but hygral fatigue has nothing to do with your conditioner and everything to do with the overuse of water, the overwashing, the over co-washing, the over spritzing, the over wash and going. That's what it boils down to. And so that's what you should really think of it as, is overwatering your hair. The same way that you overwater a plant, it's overwatering your hair. And it's just thinking about it as retraining yourself to think about how you do your regimen. The research that I did really helped me. It really helped me understand things. And I think, truthfully, I think I did already understand hygral fatigue. I just needed to put a stamp on it with some real research. So I am going to say that I would love to see some actual research on human heads of hair. I mean, you could do your own experiment at home. You know, pull out some strands of hair, set up, you know, your controls and your variables and do it that way. You could totally do that, but I would love to see like a comprehensive study on this. Please leave me a like if you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have had experiences with hygral fatigue. How do you feel about it? Has your understanding about hygral fatigue changed in this video? Definitely let me know. Let's get a conversation started in the comments below. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye.